what's Ryan looked in these first few weeks, and how is he progressing and getting used to everything he's got to do?
He's done a great job. I think all the young guys, that was the big. Obviously, we've got things that we wanted to work on with Jake and things we wanted to work on with the young guys. And I'm really pleased with all of them, how they've progressed.
Is there a definite number 2 behind Jake right now?
No, not even close.
What did y'all want to work on with Jake?
The number one thing that when we look back, we had a list of things for our whole offense, really. But number one at the top of the list was protecting the football. So we've done a better job. In my mind, and unless we go through the spring with 0 turnovers, it's not where we want to be. But I think we've done a lot better job with it.
With those young guys, what do each of them have to do before you're comfortable having to count on them to come into a game if you need to?
Well, again, there's a long list of things. Number one is protect the football. I mean, if we can do that and play good defense and run the ball and do those things, then we got a shot. So that's the number one thing by far that we've talked about all spring long, and we'll continue to. After that, it's game management, getting first downs, just making sure that we're getting into the right plays, going to the right we have a lot of options based on what the linebackers doing, what the defensive ends doing, what the safeties are doing. So if they're running the offense the way it's supposed to be run and protecting the ball, we feel comfortable putting them in the game.
How would you assess Ryan's aptitude as somebody who comes in here as a true freshman, early enrollee, compared to what you've seen in the past?
I don't like to compare to anybody, but he's done a really good job. I mean, he's studied really hard. As soon as he signed and we were allowed to start sending him playbook material, he was begging for it. And you can tell he's worked hard on it. So, again, I'm very pleased with how he's progressed.
When Jake gets into trouble with his passes, what is it that he's doing wrong from what you've viewed on tape?
Well, again, anytime there's an interception, it's a lot of different things. Sometimes it's not even the quarterback's fault.
Right.
So there's certain things, but number one for most quarterbacks is decision making. If a guy makes a great decision, just as the ball sails on him a little bit, we'll work on his mechanics, that type of stuff. But the decision making stuff is what gets you into trouble. And like I said, that's not just him; that's all quarterbacks.
Have you seen better decision making this spring?
He has. He definitely has. And again, that's been a big point of emphasis.
Dan, how much is to carry on, progress this spring from what you've seen the past year?
I think he's done a great job. I mean, he's when he came in, he was swimming just because his offense was so different than what he had run in his career. So the fact that we were asking him to do a lot of different things that he had never done hurt him, obviously. But again, he's a guy that he wants to do so well. I mean, he works as hard as anybody. He's in there watching film, studying the playbook, and he knows it and has a really good spring so far.
A word some of the other guys, players, and coaches have used with him is patience, as in not taking off to run at the first sign of trouble. Have you guys worked with him a lot on that?
Well, it's all about, going through your progressions. Obviously, he can run, so you don't want to take that away from him. So we give him his progression. Hey, if this guy's open, you throw it to him. If not, you work through, and when everybody's covered, then you take off running.
Is that something that you might have to kind of tweak a playbook if he's in, with the ones as opposed to a Jake or a Ryan?
We could always create, those type of plays. I would never call a pass play saying, hey, just take off running.
Right.
So, again, I want him to read his progression and run when he has to.
Going back to Jake and mentioning how not all interceptions are on the quarterback, off the top of your head, how many of the interceptions he had last year weren't his fault? Or
I don't know.
Yeah.
We had too many, that's all I know.
In theory, if a quarterback ends a season with 0 interceptions, is that perfect, or is that a guy who's not taking enough chances? Does that make sense?
Yeah, but I don't think there's a true answer to that question. I understand what you're saying, but if he throws 0 interceptions, but he's never thrown it to open guys, he's not going through his progression, then that's not perfect.
Yeah, right. Do Jake's more of his come due to physical mistakes or bad decisions? Would you?
Again, it's a bunch of different things. Sometimes it's not even his fault.
Right.
But that's I tell him we can only work on what you can control. Yeah. So that's what we're controlling is decision making. That's the number one thing, like I said, for all quarterbacks that we work on.
How would you, one of the things that probably has impeded him is the fact that at times you've struggled to keep things balanced as far as play calling. The run game hasn't been effective. How much of that do you think has impeded his career progress?
Well, a lot of our stuff is based on, if we're not running it, it may be because they're putting too many guys in the box. That's why we're actually throwing it. So it's not like, we say we're not running the ball. We're calling a run play, but they bring too many guys. It's built in, sort of the RPO triple option thing that we're going to throw it. So I don't think that's an accurate assessment, but One thing, we're all sitting there talking about all the negatives. Let's talk about how he threw for 510 yards in a game and some of the good things that he did, It's like all these questions are about how bad we did.
We don't get to ask you very much about it.
Well, let's talk about good stuff.
These are the questions people hound us to ask y'all.
In that Clemson game,
I understand.
what did you see in Jake that led to over 500 yards passing?
I think, first of all, I think Brian McClendon did a great job of game planning for that, of knowing where their weaknesses were and how we should attack it. And, Jake obviously executed the game plan very well. The receivers did a great job making big plays for him. So it was just one of those games where everything sort of came together. Obviously we just came up a little bit short on it.
But the last 6 quarters of the season, the offense didn't score.
Yeah, that wasn't good, obviously. Yeah. So that's the thing that we, you don't like to look back, but we're all human. We talk about that a lot about, hey, we got to get this thing right. So.
In that Clemson game, I think someone had done kind of a breakdown, and you seemed to be sort of catching them kind of, I guess, between checks. They would kind of check, and then you guys would snap the ball when they were sort of going through that. Was that the case, and was that something you guys had seen before or just kind of noticed? Or
everybody who runs this type of offense has certain ways to do that, and we did take advantage of it a couple times, so yeah.
Dan, you hear that term balance in offense all the time. Is it as simple as trying to say 50% run, 50% pass, or does balance mean something a little deeper?
I think if you look back, 20 years ago when I was a really young coach, we would line up and say, we're going to run it 50 times, or 50%, pass it 50%. And you could actually do that. But we may call a run where there's way too many guys in there, and it's not a good play. But we were hard-headed, and so that's what we're going to do. Now with these new type of plays that we have, we call a run, but they got too many in, we throw a slant, and now, granted, it may be incomplete, but it may also pop for a 20-yard gain. And people are like, well, why don't they just hand it off? If we would have handed it off, it would have been no gain. So they're just skewed nowadays with our type of offense, and that's just, you got to live with it and die with it.
Do you also use that term balance in the areas of the field that you attack, as in 33% left, 33 right, 33 center?
No, we go by game plan, what the defense is giving us. So we may call a play. We never really have a play that's going to attack over there. Right. That's where you look first. If they change the coverage, then we have to throw over here.
We're not going to see, obviously, the real offense on Saturday, I would imagine, but you guys have seen it in spring practice. So as you leave spring practice, are you satisfied with where the offense is overall?
I think as a coach, you're never really satisfied, but I'm pleased with where we are. We're definitely heading in the right direction.
Are you Are you going faster than you did last year?
The same. I mean, we went pretty fast last year, and we were pleased with how that went.
Depending on what you see in the fall, will and BMAC devise a plan for the young guys to get them in, not just in like a mop-up role, maybe in a meaningful snap situation so they get game experience for 2020?
That'll be something, obviously, we'll talk about early in camp and just see where we want to go with it. Once we decide, first of all, who's the backup.
With Ryan's recruitment, I'm sure you've probably recruited players who have dealt with personal tragedies and stuff of that nature, but with his recruitment and sort of the national scale to it all, how was that for you just as an individual, building a relationship with him and that sort of side of it?
Well, that's a tough thing to talk about, obviously, and you never want to talk too much about it or not enough. It's tough. I've had some personal tragedies in my life, so early on in our relationship, we talked about it, both of our situations, a lot, and I think we created sort of a bond there, so actually made it easier, like I said, the fact that I've been through something similar.
With the new redshirt rule, I've seen a team or two has kind of gone with the situation. If they have a young quarterback they want a redshirt that also might be backup quality, they'll kind of split that role into maybe a backup quarterback and also kind of a mop-up quarterback. If Ryan were to become the backup, is that something you guys would consider?
Again, that's something, that's a decision that's made way long time from now.
Did you guys go into the spring thinking that somebody would stand out above the rest, or did you kind of know going in that this probably wasn't going to fix itself out to the fall?
Well, that's one of those things that, you hope they all really progress, and then that way it makes it a tough decision. Mm-hmm. If they all don't progress, it makes it a tough decision, so you don't want that. And if one really does well, it's good for that guy, but obviously the other guys aren't doing well. So you just never know, and I'm glad that they all did good, so now it does make it tougher
So
on us.
it is your assessment that they all have progressed to that level?
Yep, no doubt.
What has Jay Urich been able to show you guys?
Jay is really athletic. He's actually the fastest one of all of them. And, I mean, we've put these GPS systems on during practice, and sometimes there's been a couple practices he's had like the fastest one on our team. So he's really athletic. He knows the offense. I think he's come a long way too.
Did Jake benefit this spring from the competition? Was he pushed by anybody, to force him to elevate his game?
I think, the fact that he saw those guys getting better, maybe, but I would hope in his mind he knows, hey, I'm a pro. I got to do this right, and there's things I need to work on, things I need to get better at. And, hopefully as a quarterback you're self-motivated, and I know Jake is.
Dan, have you ever sensed any frustration in DeCarrion and not being able to see the field? Maybe there was a possibility that Jake would have left this year, but he didn't. Any frustration from DeCarrion on that?
I had noticed that. I would hope as a competitor, all of them are a little frustrated. They want to get out there and play, but that's just part of our business.
Has he ever mentioned any passing thing about maybe I should try another position? Has he ever talked about that with you guys?
No, we hadn't talked about that at all.
Have you talked about it with Jay?
With who?
Urich?
No.
Just because of his athleticism?
Yeah. Everything is always open on a football team, but right now I want those guys to play quarterback.
What's the difference for you and in the quarterback room having last year a number 2 quarterback who was a veteran who has had some experience compared to this year where likely the guy who's your number 2 is, a younger guy with not much experience?
You just have to, once we get into the season, realize what this guy can do, whoever that is. Who knows? Maybe he can do actually more than what we could have done last year with our backup. But the fact that Michael Skarnecki had been around for 5 years and knew our offense inside and out, gave you a breath of fresh air when it was time for him to get in there. So we'll just have to see how these guys do. If they haven't progressed far enough, then we have to tone things down for them.
BMAC said something earlier in the spring where he said he probably implemented about half of what he wanted to last year and then the other half this year. How much of that have you noticed, and I guess what specifically of that have you noticed?
Of how much we've put in this spring?
Yes.
I don't know what the percentage is, but we definitely have put a lot more in this spring than we did last spring.
If you can removing the current personnel and not thinking about the 2019 season in this question, your thoughts on 2 quarterbacks. Are you a believer, a disbeliever? Can an offense operate if you've got 2 guys who play equally-ish?
Put it this way, I never have.
Okay.
I've never done that, and I've been doing this for a long time.
Right.
That's not to say, obviously some people have, and it's worked. We would just have to wait and see if that were.
Your second option, your first choice in a perfect world is I've got one guy, he's my guy.
Again, that would be my philosophy. Now, we've got.
A staff decision.
I got some bosses that would have to make that decision, but.
With Ryan, from a strictly football standpoint, what did you see from him in the recruiting process, and what sort of jumped out to you as a quarterback?
He's got a really quick release, made good decisions, and he's really accurate.
And have you seen all that stuff near these first?
Yeah. Yeah, like I said, I'm really pleased with how he's, and you never know now once he gets here, is he going to pick up the offense or all that stuff? But he has.
In your experience, do California quarterbacks maybe have an edge over quarterbacks from other parts of the country, maybe outside of Western PA?
I would have said that years ago because it seemed like that all those schools were throwing and not many other schools were. But now it's like they're throwing all over the country. So, at one point I think they were ahead. And I've actually recruited a lot of quarterbacks from California. But now, my recruiting trip here in 2 weeks, it's all over the country, and there's good players all over.
Are you noticing where, like especially with California, warm weather guys, do you notice that it seems like they've been able to work out all year without much of a break? Is that something that you notice in the recruiting process?
I'm sure that's part of it. But like I said, back at however long ago it was, those guys, those coaches were teaching them the pass game, the 7-on-7 stuff. They knew how to take drops. They knew all the things that a lot of other schools were back in the old days running the veer or option and handing the ball off. So, again, now with the way college football is going, so many people are throwing it. I think the high school coaches are starting to learn that stuff and wanting to teach it. And like I said, there's really good coaching going on all over the country now.
How much could Ryan benefit from playing in that league that he was in? That's obviously really good and has a ton of good players and had a ton of good
It obviously doesn't hurt. I mean, he's played against good players. He had really good players on his team, so it's not like he's not used to throwing to a really fast receiver and against a really good DB.
Do you learn something about him, watching him go through last season, where you mentioned he had a lot of good players, but a lot of those guys got hurt. His offensive line got all banged up, and he kind of had to persevere a little bit?
Yeah, I was really proud of him. I actually went out and watched one of their games, and at the end of the game, when you go shake hands, it was like half their team was on crutches or something at the back, not even suited up. So, and a lot of them were his best players. But he kept battling, and when I would talk to him, obviously I talked to him a lot. He never complained about it, never brought it up, and that's the kind of guy you want to have as your quarterback and your leader.
Is there anything to this run of elite Hawaiian kids lately, or is that just a couple of talented families who?
I don't know. It's maybe the same thing over there. They're throwing a lot. Years ago, I guess when June Jones was out there at University of Hawaii, those guys started throwing the ball a bunch. And
Do you think maybe that started a?
maybe.
Do you recruit there more? Do you, as in college football coaches, is that now a not required trip, but do you get there more than you used to, people around the country?
Well, I'd gone my whole career and never gone, but I did go for a young man a couple years ago. So, if the guys keep on coming, we'll go wherever the quarterbacks are. That's sort of what I do.
But that's got to be an interesting pitch to your head coach, or whoever the administrator. I promise we got to go to Hawaii to see this kid.
It's not quite as good as it sounds. You fly out there, you watch a guy throw, you're there for a couple hours and fly back. That's
You can't stop at Waikiki. You can't do that.
It wasn't quite as much fun as I thought it'd be.
In y'all's setup, if a quarterback's having a bad day, who makes the call about making a change at that position?
During the game, you mean? Well, the head coach. I mean, Will is obviously he decides all the major decisions.
Has Jake taken on, I guess, a different role in the room as kind of now he's the old guy really for the first time in his career?
He was joking about the other day how it just seemed so different. He and Scar had been together all this time, and now all of a sudden it's him and younger guys. But, I hadn't seen a real change in him. I mean, he's still, like I said, he's a pro. He's going to work hard and do everything he's supposed to do. And you can see he is trying to help the younger guys. I mean, he'll give them advice, and which I tell the guys, you got to listen to this guy. He's been around, not only in college, but, he's been around a football coach his whole life and his dad.
You mentioned earlier, all the negative type questions about Jake and all that kind of stuff, but you understand, I guess, too, how the fans feel about quarterbacks. They love them or they hate them, especially a guy's been around as long as Jake will be, kind of get quarterback-itis. They want to see the next guy.
Right.
So are you guys prepared as a staff on how to, if he struggles out there early on to kind of deal with that kind of reaction?
I mean, that's just something as a coach you have to deal with. I mean, because if they're getting on him, they're getting on me, they're getting on the offensive coordinator, and they're getting on the head coach. So we're all in this together, Mm-hmm. And that's part of our profession. We just deal with it.
You just turn a deaf ear?
Yeah, I mean, we're in here. That's the thing. People think that we hear what people are saying. I don't hear it. I mean, I come in on Sunday morning and start watching film from the next game, and we evaluate what we need to do to get better and talk about it as coaches and move on.
Specifically for Saturday, have you guys determined, how the workload will be split? Will Jake not get as much because he's experienced and you want to see more out of the young guys?
Yeah, we've talked about it earlier today, probably get him 2 or 3, 4 series probably and let the other guys have at it and see what they can do.
Split them up equally, the young guys?
Yes.
Does Jake get caught up at all with the stats and all-time standings and school record books and that stuff, or does that ever come up? Or I'm sure you probably don't really pay that stuff
We've
much
never
attention.
talked about it.
Yeah.
When the offense got really going and really clicking, what did you feel kind of was really working for that stretch?
I mean, I just feel like we were executing and we were getting the looks that we were understanding. I think sometimes we had a couple of times when things weren't going well. There were other factors. The last game of the regular season is pouring down rain, and we just sort of stunk it up at the end. Making bad throws, dropping balls, those kind of things. So we look more at like those and say, how do we get that fixed? Then we'll go back and look at all the good stuff and say, well, this is stuff we probably either need to call more or, find ways to get to it out of different formations or, just ways to obviously be successful.
With the carry on, and I can understand if you don't want to get into this stuff, but was there any kind of tweaking or adjustments to his mechanics or footwork or anything like that that you guys tried to?
A little bit, but that was right from the get-go. He and I got together and tried to, but it's hard once he's been throwing however he's been throwing, and this is with every quarterback. And then you get to be whatever 18, 19 years old and trying to change it and learn a new offense and all that makes it really difficult. So we didn't do a whole lot, but he worked really hard in the offseason on his own, things that he and I had talked about. And like I said, he's come back and he's throwing the ball really well now.